Happy New Year to all. It's still January 2026 and welcome to the start of a new chapter in the life of the UK Medical Freedom Alliance media channels, which I hope will inform and empower you as you navigate the tricky paths through medical interactions and interventions. And before I get into what our new programs are all about, please click on the subscribe and notification buttons because I can't tell you how much these totally free actions help us with our outreach. Now look, I would have released this new video series earlier, but I'm just getting over one of the subjects I'm about to talk about, the heavy cold. It's not the flu. I've had the flu, proper flu, and this isn't it. But anyway, if you haven't visited us before, let me quickly summarize what we are actually here for. The UK Medical Freedom Alliance, or UKMFA, is the UK's most recognised and respected organisation advocating for every individual's right to informed consent, bodily autonomy and medical choice. Founded in October 2020, we're a group of healthcare professionals, academics, lawyers and concerned members of the public campaigning for the rights to medical freedom, informed consent and bodily autonomy to be upheld in all circumstances in accordance with fundamental and established principles. And those established principles are of medical ethics and national and international laws, declarations and codes. Now, we provide easily accessible evidence-based information and legal templates on our website and social media sites to educate and empower the public and medical professionals and to aid the process of obtaining informed consent. Now, what you're watching here, UKMFA TV, or possibly listening to on our audio channel, is the media arm of the organisation, where we provide the video and audio information, campaign details, in-depth interviews with amazing guests, and now a series of news stories concerning medical ethics from around the UK and the wider world. I hope you, like a lot of others, will like our special newsroom look for these episodes. Although I have to say, it's just a plain wall, but it looks nice. You will be watching or listening on your favourite media channel, but you can also find us on many others too. There's X, Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey, Apple, Spotify, and of course our Substack, which also hosts our written content as well as the video content. And that is really the main place to go now. You may wonder what qualifies me to comment on media stories about medical matters. Well, I'm just like you, curious, seeking truth and enlightenment around the ethical and non-ethical practices I've woken up to in the past few years. Together, we shall learn how to empower ourselves when dealing with medical professionals. We'll return to the old ways of medical interactions, demanding duty of care, precautionary principles, and second opinions. So I'm asking you to join us as we gain knowledge, regain our rights regarding our health, and stand up for what is ethical. I'm going to cover 3 or 4 news stories per episode, and I'm inviting anyone who can add truthful content to get in touch at podcast@ukmedfreedom.org. That's podcast@ukmedfreedom.org. So you can come on as a guest in one of our long-form interviews, which you'll be pleased to know are continuing through 2026. We really want to hear from you. So, that's the introduction over. Let's see what has caught my eye this time after this very short message. Welcome to another broadcast by the UK Medical Freedom Alliance, the UK's most recognised and respected organisation advocating for every individual's right to informed consent, bodily autonomy and medical choice. We are the UK's voice of ethical medicine. So we've started the year with another wonderful flu, one like the one that disappeared completely to be replaced by COVID-19 in 2020. It would be remiss of me to ignore this particular strain, which has a sudden onset. It feels like being hit by a bus. It takes a lot longer to shake it off, maybe even 2 to 3 weeks, and leaves you weak and tired. Doctors clarify that whilst the strain is more severe in its intensity and ability to spread, it's not fundamentally more deadly to healthy individuals. So, it's the flu, and well known to the medics. But this doesn't stop the mainstream media reporting on it as a super flu, comparing it to a pandemic, and they're coming up with their own spin on the facts. As an example, we can look at a YouTube video from The Sun titled, Superflu outbreak triggers COVID-esque lockdowns with school and hospital ward closures, which reports on what they say is a rapidly spreading mutated strain of influenza currently impacting the United Kingdom. This highly contagious and mutated flu virus is circulating across the country, leading to a significant spike in illness. I'm sure you will recognise the echoes from 2020 as several hospitals have declared critical incidents as they struggle to manage the surge in patient admissions and staff absences. And of course, to curb the spread amongst children, some schools have implemented firebreak lockdowns, temporarily closing facilities as hundreds of students and staff fall ill. I'll speak about masks in the next story, but once again, health officials are advising anyone experiencing cold or flu-like symptoms to wear a mask in public spaces to prevent further transmission. The measures being taken are being compared to those used during the COVID-19 pandemic, reflecting the severity of the current outbreak. Except, if you've been out and about lately, hardly anyone has taken notice this time. And the comments reacting to the video are very healthy, reflecting a deeply divided and often sceptical public response. With over 230 comments the last time I looked, the reactions generally fall into three main categories. A significant portion expressing cynicism towards the reporting, many users suggesting that the term superflu and the comparison to COVID-19 are being used to create unnecessary panic. Many have accused the media and government of trying to reintroduce control or bring back 2020 through Lockdown 2.0. Comments frequently include variations of, "Here we go again," fear-mongering, and I won't be complying this time. Many viewers directed their anger towards the state of the healthcare system rather than the virus itself. Commenters argued that the critical incidents in hospitals are a result of years of underfunding and mismanagement rather than a particularly unique flu strain. There's notable frustration regarding the closure of schools, with parents expressing concern over the impact on children's education and the extreme nature of firebreak lockdowns for the flu. A smaller group of commenters shared their personal experiences with the current illness or offered alternative health perspectives. Some users confirmed they or their families, yes, they've been wiped out by this specific strain, noting it feels significantly worse than the standard seasonal flu. But discussions also emerged around the efficacy of the flu jab, with some claiming they got sick despite being vaccinated, whilst others advocated for vitamin D and strengthening the immune system naturally. Well, that brings me nicely onto masks after this short interval. Please consider donating to the UKMFA. We are really grateful for all donations, no matter how small. Your donations enable us to continue to lobby for your right to informed consent and medical freedom to be upheld, and to provide resources to educate and empower the public. There are multiple options for donating. One is that you can scan the QR code that's on this video right now, or you can go to the link that is featured in the description below this video, or you can go onto our website and contribute via donor box, or you can buy us a coffee. Back in the alternative news space is the fascinating diagram you can see now on screen, or for our audio-only listeners, I'll explain that it's actually describing a virus particle being around 6 times tinier than a red blood cell or bacteria, which are around 2 to 8 microns. Yet a face mask recommended to us all has a pore size of well over 70 microns. 70 microns is about the size of a human hair. This in turn reminded me of the claims made by Professor Sukarik Bhakti in that wearing a face mask to stop a virus is like using a chain link fence to stop a mosquito. Prior to 2020, Dr. Bhakti was a highly respected figure in German medicine. He served as the head of the Institute of Medical Microbiology and Hygiene at the Johannes Gutenberg University of Mainz for over 20 years and published over 300 papers on immunology and bacteriology. Post-2020, he argued that SARS-CoV-2 was no more dangerous than seasonal flu, and that the mortality rate was significantly overinflated by and including people who died with the virus rather than from it. He also claimed that the population already had sufficient cross-reactive immunity from previous coronaviruses, making lockdowns and mass vaccinations unnecessary. He became a leading voice against mRNA vaccines, suggesting they would cause massive autoimmune reactions, decimate the global population, and lead to widespread blood clotting and vascular damage. The University of Mainz issued a formal statement distancing itself from him, stating that his views were misleading, if not wrong, and that he no longer held any representative role at the institution. Now, I think we've heard this story all too regularly. The powers that be tried to silence him through court actions, all which failed to secure convictions. Interestingly, he is still held in high regard as undeniably a world-class microbiologist, whose early work remains foundational to the understanding of the immune system. However, his pandemic-era claims are viewed by the global scientific mainstream as a departure from evidence-based medicine. So, on the one hand, totally right, and on the other, totally wrong. I have to be honest, that makes no sense to me, and supporters view him as a courageous whistleblower who questioned a restrictive official narrative. The infographic that I related to earlier focuses on cloth mask pores averaging 70 microns, far larger than the 0.06 to 0.014 micron SARS-CoV-2 virus particle. This implies ineffectiveness against the virus itself, indeed all viral particles. A 2023 Cochrane review found uncertain evidence that community mask wearing reduced respiratory virus spread. But critics state that the reality is that viruses don't fly through the air like independent little mosquitoes, but in fact they hitchhike travelling inside respiratory droplets expelled when we talk, cough or breathe. But these droplets are supposedly larger, ranging from 5 microns to over 100 microns. So, if the holes in a mask are getting on for 100 microns, are the droplets really going to be caught by the fibres of a mask? Well, even the powers that be acknowledge that Bhakti's criticism highlights real limitations of mask wearing. Bhakti's skepticism towards universal cloth masking is even shared by some aerosol scientists who argue that only well-fitted respirators provide meaningful protection. If a mask is loose, air and droplets will simply take the path of least resistance around the sides. In this specific scenario, the mosquitoes are flying around it. Very small aerosol particles can stay suspended in the air for hours, while masks might reduce these. They don't eliminate them, especially in poorly ventilated indoor spaces. So perhaps they can all agree that at least they can say the mosquito and fence claim is, all right, treating a complex fluid dynamics problem as a simple geometry problem, but it still means a mask is not an impenetrable wall. At best, it acts as a statistical filter that partly reduces the total amount of virus a person inhales or exhales. We should all be aware that according to our public health authorities, the goal wasn't to stop every single mosquito, but to reduce the swarm. Reduce it enough that the body's immune system isn't overwhelmed. This concept is known as reducing the infectious dose. But many argue the amount of infectious dose is open to question, and masking causes a whole lot of other quite serious problems. It's worth remembering that a virus can only attack whilst you're up and moving around in a restaurant, not while seated at the table. Right? Next, vaccine adverse events are back in the news. Not that they ever left. The best place to find our content is on our Substack. That's at substack.com/@UKMFA1. That's substack.com/@UKMFA1. You'll also find us on Rumble, YouTube and Odyssey in video format, and also on your favourite podcast in audio format. We tend to use Apple and Spotify, but of course you'll find us in lots of other places too. We publish everywhere. You'll also find us on the mainstream media and alternative media too. So look out for us on your favourite channels. And don't forget, like and follow at every opportunity. Thank you. Epidemiologist and administrator at the McCullough Foundation, Nicholas Hulsher, made the X headlines, posting highlights of CDC data analysed by the ethical skeptic, showing a 77% excess in US child deaths aged 0 to 4 since 2021, attributing it to transgenerational effects from maternal mRNA COVID-19 vaccines, coinciding with a reversal of a 30-year decline in infant mortality. Provisional CDC figures confirm a modest US infant mortality uptick to about 5.6 per 1,000 live births in 2024-2025, with Mississippi declaring a public health emergency in August 2025 over its rate of 9.7 per 1,000. In the interest of balance, I should point out that the other sources link this increase to broader socio-economic factors rather than vaccines. But how can they be sure of that? It's true that temporal correlation alone does not establish causation, often summarized as correlation does not imply causation, but there was an increase in US infant mortality rates starting in 2022, from 5.44 per 1,000 live births in 2021 to 5.6 in 2022 and 5.61 in 2023, as per that official CDC data. The timing did overlap with widespread maternal COVID-19 vaccinations. In addition, there was a post from anti-vaccine activist Larry Cook. He describes himself as a healthy lifestyle advocate and full-time activist, opposing vaccine mandates and promoting the view that vaccines are dangerous and unnecessary. For balance, he is considered to be a health conspiracy theorist. Cook has published an infographic from an unpublished 2025 Henry Ford Health study listing 0 cases of conditions like ADHD, diabetes, and behavioral disabilities among 1,957 unvaccinated children versus hundreds in the 16,511 vaccinated ones, implying vaccines do cause chronic illness. There were brain dysfunctions, 8 cases, diabetes, 42 cases, ADHD, 262 cases, behavioral disabilities, 165 cases, learning disabilities, hundreds of cases, intellectual disabilities, hundreds of cases, tics, hundreds of cases, and other psychological disabilities, hundreds of cases, all against 0 in the unvaccinated group. And these 0 case conditions in the unvaccinated group are presented as evidence of superior health outcomes, aligning with broader claims in anti-vaccine circles. For example, overall chronic illness is around 57% of vaccinated versus 17% in the unvaccinated group by the age of 10, at a 2.5-fold higher risk. Now, look, we should note that the Henry Fords issued a cease and desist against its report being released for circulation, citing methodological flaws per experts. Yet they went so far as to prepare it for publication. So, look, there's no doubt that there's been a multifaceted debate surrounding COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. I noticed the recent discussion between Dr. John Campbell and Professor Robert Clancy, focusing on specific data points from Australia and Japan. It highlights a tension between observed statistical correlation and the scientific consensus regarding vaccine safety. The core of the discussion centres on excess mortality, the number of deaths above what would be expected based on historical averages. According to analysed official national data, a significant portion, nearly 2/3 of Australia's excess mortality, cannot be directly attributed to COVID-19 infections. Public health officials generally attribute these unexplained deaths to delayed healthcare during lockdown, e.g. missed cancer screenings and diagnosed heart conditions, the long-term effects of long COVID, and an ageing population. But Professor Clancy points to the timing of vaccine boosters and the subsequent rise in deaths as a reason for further investigation. The 2025 Kakea study in Japan is a specific piece of evidence suggesting a delayed mortality effect. The study observed that vaccinated individuals showed a peak in mortality 90 to 120 days after injection. Because this peak was reportedly absent in the unvaccinated group, proponents suggest it points to a vaccine-related cause. It would be wrong of me to ignore the broader scientific community that often critiques these findings based on what they call confounding variables. Two such studies, the Venus study and viral wave, state that vaccination significantly reduces the risk of death across all causes. That the stated 90 to 120 days often aligns with the natural peak of viral waves, like Omicron variants, and that those most likely to be vaccinated are also the most vulnerable and the elderly, who are at high risk of death regardless of the cause. But according to Western Australia's safety data from 2021, there was a sharp rise in adverse events following immunisation in Western Australia. Reports jumped from 1.2 to 8.5 per 100,000 doses. And the unique context was that this happened in 2021 when Western Australia had strict border controls and almost zero community transmission of COVID-19. This creates a cleaner data set because the adverse events simply cannot be blamed on the virus itself. While the adverse events were primarily non-serious, such as fever, arm pain, or headaches, the sheer volume of reports has once again fueled the debate over whether more serious, rare side effects like myocarditis are being accurately captured or underreported. Please sign up to receive our newsletter and you'll be notified of UKMFA campaigns, open letters, calls to action and any important updates. You can do this on our website at ukmedfreedom.org. That's ukmedfreedom.org. Many of you will be a follower of Dr. John Campbell, who's had a complete 180-degree turn in his opinions during the last 5 years. He's heavily criticised by some for doing so and congratulated by a greater number of others. Me? Well, I'm glad when anyone wakes up to truth over narrative. But Dr. John has released a video recently entitled Ivermectin and Iodine, where he discusses the potential use of two substances as early-stage interventions against viral infections, specifically in the context of the old COVID-19 pandemic and the current flu. He explores the hypothesis that combining oral medications like ivermectin with topical antivirals like iodine could reduce viral load and improve patient outcomes, arguing for a dual defense strategy against viral infections, specifically focusing on how these two substances might work together to reduce viral load in the early stages of illness. Campbell describes ivermectin not just as an antiparasitic, but as a repurposed drug for viral treatment. He cites observational studies and data from regions like Japan and parts of Africa and South America where ivermectin was used or distributed. The theory is that ivermectin may interfere with the viral replication process or prevent the virus from entering our cells. It's important to note that while Dr. Campbell has a large following, his views on ivermectin have been a subject of significant debate. Major health organizations, including the WHO, FDA, and NIH, have consistently stated that there is insufficient evidence to recommend ivermectin for the treatment or prevention of COVID-19, except in clinical trials. They say large-scale randomized controlled trials did not find a significant clinical benefit for ivermectin in treating COVID-19. But perhaps these organizations should own up about the integrity of their own COVID-19 vaccine trials, which was, and still is, a major subject of scientific debate. Once the initial data showed what the so-called vaccine trials considered to be high efficacy, Pfizer and Moderna unblinded their trials. They offered the vaccine to the placebo group, arguing it was unethical to leave them unprotected. The result? Well, we lost the control group for long-term data. This made it impossible to track long-term safety and identify the exact waning of effectiveness over 2 years. Because the vaccines often cause noticeable side effects, fever, sore arms, while the saline placebo did not, there was also unofficial unblinding due to the many participants guessing which group they were in. This led to reporting bias, where people who think they're vaccinated are less likely to report any negative symptoms. So to say that ivermectin trials were insufficient is really nonsense. More conclusive is the data from Japan, referencing the Tokyo Medical Association, and parts of Africa or India, like Uttar Pradesh, which suggests ivermectin distribution correlated with a sharp drop in COVID cases. The theory being that ivermectin binds to a transport protein that the virus uses to enter the cell's nucleus, thereby effectively locking the door against viral replication. So there is evidence of ivermectin benefits from thousands of individuals who swear that ivermectin saved their lives. It's true that the hardest thing to prove is causality. Most people recover from COVID-19 naturally, so if someone takes a drug and gets better, they naturally credit the drug. But would they have healed anyway if they avoided repurposed drugs? If you point to natural experiments in places like Uttar Pradesh or Japan as evidence, the drug works when used early and at scale. Many who used ivermectin did so because they felt the official medical advice, which was often just go home and wait until you can't breathe, was inadequate. For them, the evidence is the fact that they took the drug and survived. And what if they had taken the vaccine? Did it really mean they were protected? The reality of the vaccine included, for too many, injuries and even death. We interviewed victims on this channel. It's heartbreaking. For the individuals who have suffered life-changing injuries, their experience is not a statistical rarity. It's their entire reality. When health authorities emphasize that the benefits outweigh the risks, it can feel deeply dismissive to someone whose life has been upended by that rare risk. The unethical systematic failure unblinding into trials matters because when trials are unblinded early, or when passive reporting systems like VAERS or Yellow Card are used, it becomes harder to definitively link a specific injury to the vaccine. This creates a limbo where injured people feel gaslit by the medical establishment while they wait for compensation or even just basic recognition. By now, in early 2026, many governments have acknowledged these injuries through compensation schemes, proving that these aren't just anecdotes. They are recognized medical facts. Even if the frequency is low on a global scale. When we look at the evidence provided by individuals, whether they're reporting a devastating injury from a vaccine or a miraculous recovery after taking ivermectin, we are looking at the most powerful form of human evidence, lived experience. There is clear tension between this individual testimony and the statistical data used by health institutions. To provide a balanced view, I guess we have to acknowledge that both sides are often speaking two different languages. And in that case, both must be heard, and not one shut down or cancelled. Now let's move on to iodine, because Dr. Campbell's central thesis is that you can stop a virus from replicating in the nose and throat using iodine as a topical barrier. He explains that because respiratory viruses like SARS-CoV-2 primarily replicate in the back of the nose and the throat during the first few days, using a diluted iodine spray or gargle can decontaminate the area. Now, by physically neutralizing the virus at that point of entry, you reduce the total amount of virus the immune system has to deal with. And studies suggest that healthcare workers or infected individuals using iodine rinses had lower rates of severe progression and transmission. So, basically, we have a strategy of early intervention with low cost and accessible ivermectin and iodine. John Campbell expresses his frustration that low-cost repurposed drugs were not being prioritized in official public health guidelines compared to more expensive treatments or vaccines. He frequently echoes my concerns as a layperson regarding trial integrity and individual testimony. He argues that the official advice to stay home until you can't breathe ignored the fundamental principle of treating infections early. He views the dismissal of iodine and ivermectin as a failure to utilize low-cost, safe, and existing tools. And quite rightly, he suggests that because these treatments are off-patent and therefore very cheap, there is no financial incentive for Big Pharma to fund the massive gold standard trials in those sorts of drugs required for official approval. Reports from ordinary people, like you and me, claim these protocols save them. They might well be anecdotes to a statistician, but they are clear, clinical signals that should have been investigated with the same urgency as the vaccines. The bottom line is, medical ethics have been so badly breached due to a central tension of the perceived pandemic, science versus speed. The vaccines were pushed through and unblinded early, and they were pushed through like that because of a mandate to save lives immediately. And I say save lives in inverted commas. Meanwhile, repurposed drugs like ivermectin were dismissed by the establishment because they didn't have the financial incentive to pursue a fair, well-funded trial in the first place. Medical choice, that's the ethical way, not medical profit. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. I really hope you found this interesting and an easy way to catch up with ethical conundrums related to current medical matters. Join me next time for more, and please do give us the thumbs up, like and subscribe as well, and consider a small donation which helps us continue with our work. We're all unpaid and not for profit. Please share this video widely. Your health matters. We are the voice of ethical medicine.